The shaman told me that actually the best thing happened in this planet right now is the Trump to be the president. I said, how is this possible? It's the best thing to happen. He said, yes, because he's so irrational, he's so crazy. That's actually create that awakening, that we finally wake up. Because before it will be another guy and everything looks similar. But he's so different than anything else. So he's the magician who waking us up. Trump is the best thing happened ever to us. That he is the magician of the highest order. That he is there in his irrational mind to create confusion in order that the human being will find new order. And it's not so stupid.
Marina Abramović was born in Belgrade, People's Republic of Serbia, Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia, on November 30, 1946. Belgrade is the capital and largest city of Serbia. It is located at the confluence of the Sava and Danube rivers and at the crossroads of the Pannonian Plain and the Balkan Peninsula. The national borders of the Balkans are, due to many contrasting definitions, widely disputed, with no universal agreement on its components. By most definitions, the term encompasses Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Croatia, only the area south of the Sava and Kupa rivers, mainland Greece, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Romania, only northern Dobruja, Serbia, only the area south of the Danube River, and East Thrace in Turkey. However, some broader definitions also include Slovenia, in a limited or partial sense, though sources do not specify regions, and the remaining territories of Romania and Serbia. Additionally, some definitions include Hungary and Moldova due to cultural and historical factors. The province of Trieste in northeastern Italy, whilst by some definitions on the geographical peninsula, is generally excluded from the Balkans in a regional context. According to the book, The Mixed Multitude, Jacob Frank and the Frankist Movement, 1755–1816, by 𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗂𝗍𝗶. Quoting page 65. Where does Frank got in? There is one God who created everything. This God is in three persons, indivisible as to their nature. God can take a human body upon himself and be subject to all passions except for sin. In accordance with the prophecies, the city of Jerusalem will not be rebuilt until the end of time. The Messiah promised in the Old Testament will not come again. God himself will remove the sin of the first parents. This God is the true Messiah, incarnate. The manifesto was presented in Latin and signed with the full Hebrew names of its proponents. The Latin translation from Hebrew was executed by one of the most interesting characters in the early phase of Frankism, the Polish nobleman Antoni Kosakowski, called Miluda, 1718–86. Antoni grew up in the house of Dominik Kosakowski, father of the future Bishop of Livonia and a member of the Targowica Confederation, Józef Kosakowski. Having secretly married a peasant, daughter of a local millman, he fled his family's wrath to Russia, where he became an elder of the Greek Orthodox sect of 𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗂𝗍𝗶𝗁, a radical branch of the schismatic Old Believers. Later, he claimed that under the name Miluda, he ruled one of the Greek islands and reportedly spent time in one of the monasteries on Mount Athos. Contemporaries marveled at his mastery of Oriental languages including Turkish, Tatar, Hebrew, and Aramaic, as well as his profound knowledge of the scriptures and holy fathers. The 𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗂𝗍𝗶 had numerous contacts with the Jews. In Poland, their faith was considered so close to Judaism that some members of the Polish nobility wanted them to pay the Jewish poll tax. Miluda met Frank somewhere in the Balkans and saw in him a chance for a return to Poland. His exact role in the formulation of the Frankist manifestos and points for the disputations is a matter of conjecture, but it is certain that he was one of the most important sources of information on the selected Christian concepts that helped construct the Frankist teachings. Quoting page 128. Finally, contemporary accounts showed that among the converts was a large group of Jews who came to Poland from the Ottoman Empire and the Balkans especially for the purpose of converting to Roman Catholicism. Quoting page 161. The unprecedented alliance of the Catholic clergy and the rabbinate drove Frank and his Polish followers into a corner and left them no other option than to convert to Christianity. Their brethren who came to Lwów from Turkey and the Balkans, poor and oppressed by the rabbis as they may have been, still had other choices. Nevertheless, they decided to leave everything behind and plunge into total uncertainty. Quoting page 199. 𝗲𝗏𝗱𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗏𝗂 and Jacob Frank. Early parallels. To understand the development of Frankism in the 1770s and 1780s, we must first discuss Frank's most important rival for the leadership of Eastern European Sabbateans, Wolf, the youngest son of Rabbi Jonathan 𝗖𝗆𝗱𝗁𝗱𝗏. The links between Wolf and the Frankists went back to 1755, the very year when Frank's activity in Poland began. In that year, at the request of his father, Wolf, who was then 15 years old, undertook a journey to the Balkans, Podolia, Moravia, and Hungary. During his journeys, he reportedly met Frank as well as one of the most important participants in the Kamenic and Lwów disputations, Solomon Shore. In Moravia, he associated with the 𝗍𝗏𝗃 family. Quoting page 201. Wolf's contacts with the disciples of Baruchia during his journeys to the Balkans and especially his alleged marriage with Baruchia's daughter or granddaughter are clear indications of his attempts to tap into the same Sabbatian tradition. It seems that from 1755 to 1760, Wolf presented himself as a transmitter of secret Sabbatian beliefs from the Ottoman Empire and the Balkans to Eastern Europe and, accordingly, competed with Frank for the leadership of Podolian and Moravian Sabbatians. Quoting page 228. The 𝗲𝗰𝗲𝗶𝗃 was a death sentence for the Asiatic brethren in the Habsburg monarchy. Within a year, the Asiatics relocated from Austria to Schleswig. Around that time, 𝗍𝗏𝗃𝗃 left the order. He settled in Vienna and started to make a fortune by furnishing supplies for the Austrian army in the Balkans. He might also have switched allegiance and joined the Illuminati, since from 1786 to 1790, former members of this order were the dominant force of Moravian Masonry. According to the book, The Burden of Silence, 𝗧𝗿𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗍𝗹 and the Evolution of the Ottoman Turkish Donmehs. Quoting page 31. It is important to note that Sabbatai traveled through the land route to Izmir, Aleppo, Jerusalem, and Cairo only after 1658. Before this time he understandably preferred to use sea routes, and traveled mostly in the Balkans. Quoting page 100. Edward Brown, traveling through the Balkans in September 1669, observed that the Sabbatean spirit was very much alive among the Jews. He, in the town of Larissa, heard some Turkish songs concerning Sabbatai. In the early 1670s, Antoine Galland relates that messianic hope among the Balkan Jews was quite pronounced and widespread. Quoting page 104. Examining the southeastern European Christian cases, for example, Minka found that there was a rising trend in conversion accounts by the second half of the 17th century. He also claims that conversions were the result not of economic need so much as a way for elites and their followers to enhance their status and ensure social advancement. Some of these converts maintained their original faiths in secret. As discussed in Chapter 5, these mass conversions paved the way for the rise of crypto-Christian communities in the Balkans and Anatolia in the 18th and 19th centuries. Quoting page 109. It is not known how many people were in the convoy or how long it took them to get to Dulcigno. There is no doubt that Sabbatai's journey generated great excitement as he passed through these Balkan cities, in which messianic fervor was still very much alive. But traveling from one city to the next via forested mountains in winter must have been an arduous odyssey indeed. There were major roads leading from Salonika to Eastern Europe, one through the province of Bosnia, another through Bulgaria by Wyden, and a third that deviates from the last at the city of Sofia, leading in the direction of Belgrade. Quoting page 110. The Bosnian route was relatively less frequented as it was so mountainous. Since Dulcigno is in the same direction as the province of Bosnia, the convoy probably took the road through Bosnia, and the journey must have taken nearly 1 month. On the way, they must have passed through Salonika, Monastir, Ioannina, Ohrid, Elbasan, and Berat, where considerable numbers of Jews were living. Ioannina had the largest Jewish population in the Balkans after Salonika. The closest town to Dulcigno with a Jewish community was the prosperous town of Berat. quoting page 135. Although it was not a general Ottoman policy to encourage mass conversion, small-scale Christian conversions were not uncommon, especially in the Balkans throughout the 17th and 18th centuries. Quoting page 253. The following excerpt from Lucy Garnett illustrates the still incomplete transformation. Either from the fact of Sabbathai's having disappeared from the world at Belgrade, or from his having left Salonika by the Vardar Gate, he is expected to arrive from that direction, and every day, for the last 2 centuries, a Donmeh has gone out on this road at sunrise in order to meet and welcome him. Since the opening of the railway between Belgrade and Salonika, a question has arisen as to the possibility of the Messiah's arrival in the latter city by train. And consequently, report says, a Donmeh is always to be seen at the terminus when the northern mail is due, watching eagerly for the passenger who has tarried so long, and at whose coming the faithful will be rewarded for their long watching and service by being appointed lords of the earth. Quoting page 259. Since the Donmehs were considered by both sides to be Muslim, they, too, were subject to the population exchange. The Donmeh existence and migration to different cities in Turkey, the Balkans, and Europe for business and education purposes had already begun in the 19th century. Quoting page 134. Again, another time in 1683, a Jew of Salonika preached of himself that he was the Messiah. All the Jews of Jerusalem believed in him. They wrote about him to the other cities in which Jews were located. In this way, as well as by letters, they had declared him the first Israelite prince. The Jews rejoiced at their false Messiah and revered him as a king. This noise arrived at the ears of the Emperor of the Turks, who then resided in Belgrade. The Emperor sent his men to stop this false Messiah. Those sent by the king had found the Messiah sitting in a house, surrounded by bright lights, and esteemed as a king. They arrested him and sent him to the king. This was the place where, out of fear, he accepted the Muslim religion. When he got back to Salonika, several of the notable Jews, not being able to bear this shame, themselves converted to Islam. According to the book, 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗏, The Mystical Messiah, 1626–1676. Quoting page 256. Sabbatai arrived in Jerusalem in the late summer of 1662 and left again for Egypt toward the end of 1663. One of the most illustrious rabbinic scholars in Jerusalem at the time was 𝗧𝗿𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗏, 1620–74, author of a commentary on the Mishnah, 𝗖𝘆𝗰𝗋𝗲, and of other works. He stood at the head of a Talmudic college, ● that is, close or cloister in Sephardi idiom, which a wealthy family in Leghorn, Vega, had endowed, and there he studied and raised many disciples, among whom were such well-known scholars and rabbis as 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗆, subsequently Rabbi of Belgrade in Serbia, and Moses ibn Aviv of Jerusalem. One of 𝗧𝗍𝗆 contemporaries at the college was a young student of Ashkenazi origin, whose father had come to Jerusalem from Poland or Germany. His name was Abraham Nathan B. Elisha Im Ashkenazi, and he was to become famous as Nathan, the prophet of Gaza, or simply, at least among the anti-Sabbateans after the debacle, as Nathan of Gaza. His father, Elisha Im Jacob, was surnamed Ashkenazi after settling in Jerusalem, where almost the whole community was Sephardi. The son too is referred to in some of the earlier documents and letters as Nathan Ashkenazi. The father spent many years traveling as an emissary of the Jewish community of Jerusalem. He visited Poland, Germany, Italy, and repeatedly Morocco, and was everywhere received with great respect. His activities on behalf of the Sabbatean movement did not in the least detract from and perhaps even increased his prestige with the Moroccan rabbis. Quoting page 669. The community of Belgrade dispatched 2 official emissaries to 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗆𝗍. The rabbi, 𝗍𝗍 had been a fellow student of Nathan's at the yeshiva of 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗆 in Jerusalem. Now he was a prominent believer, and devoutly copied all the writings of the prophet that reached his city. The city of Belgrade, Serbia, occupies a highly complex and strategic position within the history of the Balkan Peninsula, acting for centuries as a vital nexus where Eastern and Western empires, cultures, and esoteric movements collided. Among the most profound, yet frequently obscured, chapters of the city's history is its role as a major hub for heterodox Jewish messianism, specifically the intersecting legacies of Sabbateanism, its later offshoot Frankism, and the crypto-Jewish Donmeh network. It is within this specific geographic and historical theater that the performance artist Marina Abramović was born in 1946. Given the deep roots of crypto-Jewish activity in Belgrade, a critical exploration of the city's radical mystical heritage provides a necessary framework for examining the structural, cultural, and spiritual environment that shaped the region, prompting further inquiry into the potential genealogical connections between families of the old Balkan intelligentsia and the area's historical crypto-Jewish underground. Historically, Belgrade's involvement with the Sabbatean movement dates back to the very inception of the messianic fervor sparked by 𝗧𝗿𝗶𝗁𝗍𝗶𝗁 in the mid-17th century. The city was not a passive observer but an active operational center for the movement, guided by highly influential rabbinic authorities. Foremost among these was Rabbi 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗍𝗶𝗁, who assumed leadership of the Belgrade Jewish community in the 1660s. 𝗍𝗆𝗆𝗍𝗁 was an elite rabbinic scholar educated at the prestigious 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗍𝗁 Talmudic College in Jerusalem under Rabbi Jacob 𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍. Crucially, 𝗍𝗆𝗆𝗍𝗁 was a direct contemporary and close schoolmate of Nathan of Gaza, the primary theologian and prophet of the Sabbatean movement. When Nathan's prophetic proclamations spread, 𝗍𝗆𝗆𝗍𝗁 transformed Belgrade into a primary node of devotion, meticulously transcribing and preserving the prophet's mystical writings and officially dispatching emissaries from Belgrade to 𝗧𝗿𝗆𝗆𝗍𝗁. Following 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗐's conversion to Islam in 1666, the Balkans became the crucible for the emergence of the Donmeh, followers who practiced 𝗧𝗍𝗍's radical, paradox-driven theology by adopting Islam outwardly while maintaining their distinct messianic Kabbalistic rituals in secret. Belgrade remained so deeply embedded in this eschatological geography that well into the 19th and 20th centuries, Donmeh traditions recorded that the faithful would explicitly watch the northern gates and the Belgrade to Salonika railway line, maintaining a centuries-old vigil expecting the Messiah to return from the direction of Belgrade. In the 18th century, this Balkan crypto-Jewish network directly birthed the Frankist movement under Jacob Frank, who adapted Sabbatean theology into a radical framework that later utilized outward conversion to Roman Catholicism in Eastern Europe as a mystical cloak. Frank himself formulated much of his doctrine while traveling extensively through the Balkans, leveraging existing Sabbatean communities to establish a network that bridged the Ottoman Empire with the Habsburg monarchy and Poland. The historical record indicates that large contingents of crypto-Jews routinely migrated from the Ottoman Balkans up through Belgrade to Poland and Austria to participate in these mass, strategic conversions. Furthermore, prominent regional figures, such as the Moravian Jewish 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗍𝗶𝗁 family, who funded their esoteric operations by supplying the Austrian army in the Balkans, continually utilized Belgrade and its surrounding territories as an economic and logistical base. Consequently, Belgrade functioned for generations as an incubation zone where families shifted fluidly between public identities, Muslim, Christian, or Orthodox, and clandestine Kabbalistic associations. This historical backdrop invites a rigorous scholarly discussion regarding the lineage of old prominent families native to Belgrade, including that of Marina Abramović. Born to high-ranking Yugoslav communist parents who were hailed as national war heroes, Abramović's family belonged to the absolute elite of the post-World War II Yugoslav structure. Her maternal great-uncle was Varnava Rozic, who served as the patriarch of the Serbian Orthodox Church from 1930 to 1937. Within the complex socio-political history of the Balkans, elite status, ecclesiastical leadership, and sudden shifts towards secular political dogmas, such as communism, frequently intersected with older, hidden familial lineages. Throughout the centuries of Ottoman and Habsburg rule in Belgrade, mass conversions and the adoption of Orthodox Christian or Muslim identities were common strategies employed by crypto-Jewish elites to secure social advancement, evade rabbinic or imperial persecution, and preserve their tight-knit communal structures in secret. Because the Donmeh and Frankist networks were explicitly built upon the doctrine of total outward assimilation, many such families completely submerged their origins, leaving behind public records that indicate only devout Christian or Muslim heritage. In the context of Marina Abramović's avant-garde work, which frequently centers on extreme physical endurance, ritualistic symbolism, transgressive acts, and the manipulation of bodily states, some cultural theorists have noted structural parallels to the paradoxical, boundary-breaking nature of historical Sabbatean Frankist mysticism, which sought spiritual elevation through the shattering of conventional taboos. However, such thematic parallels remain strictly speculative without empirical evidence. To definitively prove or disprove whether Abramović descends from a crypto-Jewish lineage, comprehensive and rigorous genealogical research is required. Investigative paths must delve into the maternal and paternal archival records of the Belgrade region, examining property registries, Ottoman administrative records, regional parish rolls, and the specific marriage alliances of the Rosic and Abramović lineages across the 18th and 19th centuries to determine if any hidden ties exist to the historic Sabbatean Donmeh underground of the Balkans.